Hi there, it's John here, just doing a quick video to show you how I do fantasy world building through history. This video is just to accompany an article on my website, it's morethanjustgaming.com. If this screen looks a bit familiar to you, then possibly you've read a recent article by me where I talk about planning as your first draft. Now, in my fantasy world building, the sort of like the thrust of the article is I like to actually plot out the history of my world. I do fantasy writing, and I like doing high fantasy, and I like to explore the history of the world because that helps me sort out what the rules are of the world. So this isn't an empty Scrivener file. I'm going to use this Scrivener file, and then I'm going to use a quick glance at one that's actually much further on. I'll give you a glance at my project one, although not for too long, I have to say, because it's got secret stuff in it. It's got my writing projects in it. So Scrivener, if you're unaware, is a corkboard ring binder piece of software that that writers can use, games masters and Dungeons and Dragons can use. What happens is you have a workspace that, if you look on the left hand side of the screen, it's got a draft. It starts off with one untitled document in there. I've clicked on it, and because I've actually split the workspace left and right, and the right workspace was highlighted when I clicked on Untitled, it actually brought up the blank page that Untitled is. I added in folders to the area on the left space. The first folder is what happened before, and the second folder is draft 1. And at the bottom, you can see there's actually a research area where I've got journal. If I click on the right hand side, then click on journal, it brings up the journal again. This is just text from an old article that I wrote about using Scrivener. But actually, when I'm using Scrivener to build the rules of a world, so that I can do a draft, I have a writing journal. The reason for that is I need somewhere to collect all my disorganized thoughts. So whenever I have ideas, I date them and I write them into the journal, and I can go back there and refresh my memory anytime I need to. And use that writing as a brainstorm. I then would go to the draft area when I'm ready to start building the history. I would right click on it and add a new folder, and I would just need to type in a title. This is a test. And if you sort of double click on the folder icon, you drop down into that folder, and you can add new documents. Say this is also a test. If I go back to the draft and see what's all here, I've got draft 1 set up, and I'll double click on it, and I've made 12 events in there that are the cornerstone of this draft. Because this is just a test document, there's actually nothing in these apart from event 1 is written into the first event. You'll notice that Scrivener is actually quite user-friendly. Once I got into event by clicking on the document icon, I could actually just go back by clicking on the left button in the sort of like the status bar of that part of the document. But this isn't a tutorial about Scrivener as such. So imagine I've written down maybe 500 words of thoughts about what my world's history is going to be like, and I've got a rough order. I would go into the what happened before folder, and I'd say the first event is in the beginning. So I would title it that. I would also copy that title, go into it, and paste that title. There's a very specific reason, and yes, I'm aware it's telling me that I spelt it incorrectly. Doesn't matter, because this is never going to see the light of day in any professional publication, other than this video, of course. I would then write there was an event where stuff happened, and some people did some things. So So that's all that I would do at the start. I would then go back to the folder, and I'm thinking, okay, so now I've got a little bit of a history. What happens after that? What are they going to do? And I would just keep on adding new cards to the what happens before. Actually, I'm going to delete that just now. Move to trash, because there's a really cool little trick in Scrivener. If I just hit return a couple of times, some people did some stuff. That's going to be the title of the next thing in the chronology. If you highlight that and then right click it, split with selection as title, suddenly you've got a new document with that as the title. If I go back to what happened before, I've got a new note card there. But what's really cool is if at the top of Scrivener there's different ways of looking at the documents within a folder. So it's got just sort of like summaries, note cards, and actually you can view it all as one long document. So that's why I actually like to keep the titles on the note card and in the text as well, so that you can actually see as a part of the summary. You can just, once you've got lots and lots of events, you can scroll through this. And I think that's actually probably a good point to jump onto a document where I actually have a lot of this already done. Okay, we're now actually looking at my project file for the project I'm working on just now. I'm just going to, as you can see on the left hand side of the screen, I've got a lot of note cards in the, what's the sort of like the ring binder area. I'm just going to close some stuff. The rules of the world, I've not actually written into the document the rules of the world. That was just a convenient blank thing to keep on the right hand side of the screen just now. You can see that on the left hand side of the screen on my corkboard area, whoops, daisy, I clicked on that and it went up a level, which is actually fine. You can see I've built a timeline folder which has the first, second and third ages of my world. We're going to focus on the first age because it's quite far removed from the story anyway, so it's not going to, if you're able to somehow read stuff on the screen, it's not going to spoil loads. I would request that you don't read too much into the stuff on the screen, but each of these note cards represents a different idea. So let's click on in the beginning. So there's a paragraph in the beginning, and I broke my own rules by not having the title in the beginning there. Then there was the coming of something, the coming of the children of the stars, and then it goes on and on and on. Each and every one of these has, or should have, a paragraph in it. If I do that, I can now actually scroll through it and read the entire timeline. I can go back and quickly assess what the history of the world is, and I think, ah yes, I know what I was trying to achieve there. Great. That means I understand why things have happened. There are stories attached to them. That's important. If you understand why something has happened, you get consistency. If a story is attached to it, it's more memorable, which makes it easier for you to remember. Remember and all that. Yeah, that was obvious. Sorry for patronizing you there. But it's also when you tell stories like that, when you do the history of your world and you generate the stories of the history of your world, you get other ideas for future plot, things that might affect your characters later on. Possibly nothing in the first age is going to directly affect the characters in my plot, but you never know, because the first age was about the coming of something and the birth of something. But I can always go through the first stage and see this is how these things happened, this is why people believe this, and so on. Because it's ingrained in a sort of like a story, it's easier for me to remember, and if I need to, I can just actually open up the screen and just run through. And anytime I have stuff that need to be updated, I can just put it in bold, or I can put asterisks around it or anything to remind me that I still have stuff to do. What else do I need to tell you? When you're doing this, when you're putting these note cards together, they can be moved around if you want. which means if you actually put one event in, and then you put in a second event, and then you need to put in another event, but it's actually in between the two. It's very easy to shift them around, and you can build very, very rich and detailed histories that way. And once you've got those histories, you understand the whats and the whys, and it's very, very, very easy for you to deliver what happened next. So in my folder, excuse me, I've got my timeline. And then I've got my drafts. The timeline basically takes me right up to where stories start. The Third Age basically is my folder which deals with the immediate history before the story, so the birth of characters and what happens to them. I'm not going to show you that because that's, well, like I say, I'm writing that story just now and I don't particularly want to spoil anything. The First Age established the world, the Second Age established the nations, and the Third Age I set up to establish characters, and now I'm actually writing the story. I know where the characters come from, I know what their histories are, I know if they've met one another or not, I have consistency, and it's easy enough to remember because it is a story, and if I don't remember, it's quick enough for me to actually just go into the appropriate Scrivener folder, click on the right thing, and just read through, because we're only talking a couple of thousand words here. It doesn't take that long to actually find the relevant notes. I hope that's of help to you. Thanks for watching.